In the red cliffs of Alpine, Texas, a wild Mustang lay broken beneath the sky. Not from the fall, but from something far worse. They said he wouldn't survive. They said he was just an animal. But when Clayton Ridge, a retired vet with nothing left to prove, heard that mournful cry echo off the canyon walls, he didn't hear a horse. He heard a soul asking to be seen. What happened next wasn't science. It wasn't luck. It was something else entirely. Something that would silence doubters, transform enemies, and reveal the heart of the wild like never before. Before we begin, tell us where you are watching from. And if this story touches your heart, please subscribe for more. In the frigid stillness of Alpine, Texas, where the Davis Mountains cut the sky like ancient stone knives, the dawn did not rise gently. It crept over the rust-colored ridges with the sharpness of frost and the silence of regret. A bitter wind howled through the crags, dry and metallic, like the breath of something watching. Clayton Ridge adjusted the focus on his binoculars with the slow deliberation of a man who no longer trusted the world to give him good news. 65 years old and carved from mountain life, Clayton stood tall but slightly hunched like an old pine weathered by too many winters. His skin was bronzed and dry from decades under open skies, his beard silver but trimmed close. His eyes, steel blue and perpetually narrowed from years of desert sun, were sharp with clarity but softened by experience. He wore a beaten oilskin coat over denim layers and boots dusted with red sand. A retired wildlife vet from Colorado, Clayton had once run clinics in war zones for neglected animals. A man shaped more by grief than triumph, his days of chasing accolades were gone. All he wanted now was quiet and redemption. But quiet had just broken. "Got movement," he muttered, breath fogging slightly in the cold. Rowan Tate didn't reply right away. She was crouched beside him, her long, lean form still as stone, hands adjusting the settings on a professional-grade camera. She was a woman who had spent her life on the knife edge of civilization. Deserts, glaciers, jungles. At 58, Rowan was striking in an angular, enduring way. Auburn hair streaked silver was braided tight against the chill, and her green eyes had the look of someone who had seen beauty and ruin in equal measure. Tall and whip-thin, Rowan moved with purpose, spoke with restraint, and trusted only what she could frame through a lens. Years of capturing endangered wildlife in dying habitats had honed her into something fierce and patient, an artist with a mission, shaped by a world that rarely heeded warnings. "What kind of movement?" she asked, lifting the camera. Clayton's voice lowered. "Horse. White. Alone." The lens found it instantly. A Mustang, wild, untethered, picked its way across a rocky ledge about 70 feet below. At first glance, it was mythic. Sleek white coat marbled with flecks of silver, mane windswept and full, tail like a banner of defiance. But there was something else, something in the way it moved. One hind leg dragged slightly. Its head shook every few steps as if disoriented. Rowan exhaled. "He's injured." "No," Clayton said, watching more closely. "He's poisoned." They stared in silence. The horse's gait grew more erratic. Then suddenly its hind leg collapsed completely, and the animal tipped sideways, its hooves skidding on loose shale. In a breathless instant, the stallion plunged, tumbling down the cliffside with a horrifying elegance, a cascade of white and red and bone, until it slammed with brutal finality onto a narrow outcrop 30 feet below. Dust rose. Silence followed. Then a sound neither of them expected. It was not the shriek of pain or the desperate scream of a wounded beast. It was lower, rounder, haunting. A throaty, deliberate cry, long and mournful, that spiraled through the canyon like a question spoken directly into the marrow of the earth. It wasn't wild. It wasn't feral. It was pleading. Clayton's spine stiffened. That wasn't a call for help from an animal. That was a voice asking to be heard. Behind them, a crisp, skeptical voice broke the spell. "We're anthropomorphizing again, aren't we?" Dr. Emery Blake emerged from the trail, clipboard in hand, glasses already fogging from the temperature shift. 62, with salt and pepper hair precisely parted, he wore khaki expedition gear like armor and carried the cautious arrogance of a man ruled by data. A former professor of wildlife toxicology, Emery had joined the expedition under the pretense of scientific neutrality, though his allegiance to logic often clashed with the visceral truths Clayton believed in. "I don't think that horse made a cry of metaphysical consequence," Emery continued, descending stiffly to their position. It's likely neurological degradation due to environmental toxins. Seizures sometimes affect the vocal cords. Clayton didn't turn. Doesn't matter what caused it. That horse is dying. And that sound, Rowan whispered, eyes never leaving the outcrop. I'll hear it in my sleep. A fourth voice joined them, polished, urbane, and incongruous. Am I interrupting something sacred? Jackson Coyle arrived as if he'd stepped off a corporate brochure. 60 years old and silver-haired, with a jaw like a politician and clothes that looked fresh despite the terrain, Jackson was the CEO of Coyle Earthworks, a mining conglomerate with contracts across the Southwest. He had the stride of someone who never needed to worry about where to step, because someone always cleared the path first. His role in this expedition was carefully negotiated, a courtesy observer sent to oversee environmental impact discussions. In truth, he was a threat wrapped in fleece and PR polish. Clayton's voice went flat. You're late. I was ensuring our communications uplink is functional, Jackson replied, smiling with professional ease, and I see I missed the drama. You missed a creature falling to its death, Rowan snapped. Not drama. Jackson approached and peered down. Well, not quite dead, it seems. He squinted. Is it moving? Clayton adjusted his binoculars again. The stallion, somehow, was lifting its head. Bloodied but breathing, its chest rose in labored pulses. Then it made the sound again, quieter now, strained. Clayton whispered, He's asking for help. Or having a spasm, Emery offered, still writing notes. But no one was listening to Emery anymore. As the sun climbed higher, washing the cliffs in brittle light, the four stood in silence, each processing the moment through a different lens. Clayton felt it like a summons. Rowan captured it through her viewfinder. Emery wrestled it into data points. And Jackson? Jackson stared at the white horse with something almost resembling doubt. The wind shifted. The scent of copper and dust filled the air. Clayton lowered the binoculars. Get the ropes, he said. I'm going down there. You'll never make it, Emery warned. That ledge is barely stable. Then let's be quick. Rowan looked at Clayton. Her voice dropped an octave. You sure about this? I've spent my life saving animals I never should have reached, he said. I'll take one more chance. Rowan nodded. Then I'm your eyes. As they prepared for the descent, the group shifted subtly, roles crystallizing. Emery returned to his gear to pull water testing kits. Jackson lingered, arms crossed, gaze flicking between the cliff and the sky, as if weighing the risks to his company. But for a heartbeat, when the wind stilled, all of them heard it again, that same cry, less forceful, but just as human, and something shifted. Just slightly. Enough to unsettle certainty. By mid-morning, the sun in Alpine burned high, carving cruel shadows along the cliff's edge where the wind bit sharper than usual. Clayton Ridge stood with his boots balanced on the fractured stone of the outcrop, 30 feet below the main trail, sweat beading along his brow despite the chill. The harness bit into his hips, and the rope creaked with every subtle shift. But none of it mattered. Not the danger. Not the age in his knees. Only the still-living body of the Mustang lying before him. Ashfire, Rowan had named him, that the moment she saw his silver-white coat flare in the wind like smoke, lay motionless, chest barely rising. Up close, the stallion's injuries were brutal. A gash along his flank exposed raw tissue. His right hind leg was twisted unnaturally. But what Clayton focused on were the eyes, amber gold, glassy with pain, but aware. Not frantic, not wild, watching. The stallion didn't flinch when Clayton knelt, didn't snort, didn't kick. Instead, it released that same haunting sound, softer now but unmistakably intentional. 3 short, strained exhales followed by 2 longer ones. Then again, Clayton slowly extended a hand, palm down. Easy now, boy, he murmured. Not here to hurt you. Above, Rowan steadied the rope, voice sharp but steady. You've got 10 minutes, Clay. That ledge won't hold forever. I'll need less. He gently examined the wound. No fracture. Swelling's bad but manageable. He's been poisoned. Look at his gums. Pale. Tremor in his muscles. Could be arsenic. Maybe lead. He reached for a vial in his side pouch and carefully scraped blood from the torn skin, sealing it tight. Back up on the ridge, Dr. Emery Blake watched with a conflicted grimace. This is reckless. That horse is an apex grazer. If it lashes out, he's not going to. Rowan snapped. Just watch. And Emery did. Silent now, the scientist observed as Ashfire let Clayton clean the wound, even nudging the man's elbow once, softly. Not out of aggression. almost like recognition. When Clayton finally gave the signal, Rowan and Jackson worked the pulley, raising man and Mustang slowly, painfully, over the cliff edge. Jackson's face was pinched, his tailored gloves stained with rope fibers. But he didn't stop pulling. Once Ashfire was secured to a padded tarp near camp, Clayton knelt beside him again. "This horse, he didn't survive by luck," he muttered. "He knew we were here." "Don't anthropomorphize," Emery started again, but softer this time. Jackson crouched down, eyeing the stallion. "Is he stable?" "For now," Clayton said. "But we need to find the source. Something did this." Emery looked up. "I've been testing water samples. Took a few from the stream near the South Trail. There's something in them. Trace amounts of mercury. Possibly lead too." Rowan frowned. "Mining runoff?" "Could be," Emery said. "But it's not definitive yet. Could also be agricultural, defensive poisoning." That word drew attention. Just then, a voice called from the brush, gravelly and low. "You're not wrong." An older man stepped into view, leading a weathered mule. His name was Miller Hayes, a rancher whose property bordered the valley's grazing land. Miller was in his 70s, hunched but muscular, with leathery skin and hands blackened by earth. A faded denim jacket bore the name Dustwood Ranch. His left boot dragged slightly from an old rodeo injury. "I saw your setup," he said. "Didn't want to interfere. But I know what's happening to the animals. Some of the boys in town been laying out bait laced with compound 1080. Coyotes got bold last winter. Took a dozen calves. Now they're poisoning carcasses and not checking what else feeds." Clayton stood, face grim. "You realize a Mustang is a protected species?" "I do now," Miller said. "Didn't know they were roaming this far up. Thought we were hitting varmints. Didn't mean to take out your ghost horse." "No one owns him," Rowan said. "That's the point." Miller took off his hat. "I'll spread the word. No more baits near this side of the ridge. I'll help you find where they're laid." After he left, the camp turned quiet. Emery moved more than he let on, sat near the data station, eyes flicking between his notes and Ashfire. Jackson stood apart from the group, looking down at his polished boots, now scuffed. His voice, when he spoke, was quieter. "My company's test drills went through the southern basin. We did chemical blasting in small areas. They said the exposure window was negligible." "It wasn't," Clayton said. "Not for something drinking from those streams daily." Rowan glanced up. "Is this your moment, Jackson? You gonna pretend none of this matters?" He didn't answer right away. "Then, I'll escalate it. Talk to the board. Have them review our EIA." Clayton walked over, lifted a sample vial. "Do more than review it. Shut it down." Later, as twilight set fire to the mountaintops and cold air settled into the basin, the team gathered around a low camp stove. The warmth barely reached their fingers, but it softened the silence. Ashfire lay nearby under heavy blankets, sedated with low doses but still breathing, still watching. "I'm going to analyze that vocalization," Emery said unexpectedly. "The repetition, the rhythm. It might not be language, but it's intentional." Rowan sipped from a metal mug. "So, now you believe?" "I believe I don't know everything," Emery said. Clayton didn't smile, but the fire in his eyes flickered brighter. That night, the wind brought no howling, only the sound of a horse breathing. And 4 people who began the day as strangers, now waiting on the edge of something they could not name, but deeply felt. Night in the Davis Mountains fell with a hush that seemed to quiet even the stars. The wind, which had clawed at tents and rattled supply crates all day, dropped to a whisper, as if pausing to listen. At the center of the camp, under canvas and firelight, Ashfire stirred. His long neck shifted, and from deep within his chest came a sound, a now familiar rhythm of breath and tone, 3 short exhales followed by 2 long, then again. Then again. Rowan Tate had been dozing beside the medical tent, camera cradled in her lap. Her sharp green eyes blinked open, and she tilted her head, listening. The sound had changed, more urgent, more insistent. She rose silently, boots soft against dry grass, and moved to Ashfire's side. The stallion was no longer sedated. He had risen halfway onto his haunches, ears pricked toward the north. "Clay," Rowan called softly. Clayton Ridge emerged from the tent, rubbing the ache from his knees. His weathered face looked even more tired under the moonlight, but his eyes sharpened the moment he heard it. That strange cry again, methodical, mournful. "He's doing it again?" Rowan whispered. Clayton crouched beside the horse, laying a hand on its neck. Ashfire didn't flinch. Instead, he stood, slowly, shakily, and took 3 steps toward the ridgeline before stopping to look back. Emery Blake, notebook in hand, joined them, his usually skeptical tone subdued. "This isn't random behavior. I've logged 12 repetitions, same sequence. It's communication." Jackson Coyle came out last, adjusting a coat far too clean for wilderness work. "He's trying to go somewhere." Clayton nodded. "Then we follow." Rowan frowned. "Are you sure that's safe?" "He's not leading us into danger," Clayton said. "He's leading us to something." Ashfire began to walk. They followed in silence, each member of the group drawn forward by something unspoken. The stallion limped but moved with clear intent, navigating game trails that twisted through the dark like forgotten veins. Hours passed. Moonlight fractured through pines. The terrain grew steeper, colder. Dusting of snow clung to shaded crevices. Eventually they crested a ridge and saw it. A narrow outcropping that overlooked a bowl-shaped valley hidden from view, nestled against the mountainside like a secret held too long. Ashfire paused, breathing hard, then let out the same pattern, 3 short exhales too long, and moved into the shadows of a shallow cave carved by wind and time. They hesitated only a moment before entering. The smell hit them first, copper and rot. Then they saw her. A mare, barely breathing, lay on her side near the back wall. Her coat had once been a rich chestnut, but now it was dull with sweat and streaked with blood. Beside her were 3 foals, 2 unmoving, the third mewling softly, nudging its mother with a trembling nose. Rowan gasped. "Oh God." Clayton stepped forward instinctively. "She's dying." Ashfire moved to her side, nuzzled her gently. Then he turned to Clayton and did something none of them expected. He touched his forehead to Clayton's chest, just once. A deliberate act. "He brought us here," Emery said softly. "Not to run, to rescue." Clayton dropped to his knees, checking vitals. "She's severely dehydrated, breathing shallow, feverish, the foal's underweight, anemic." Rowan was already unpacking the emergency medical kit. "We don't have enough supplies for all 3. 2 are gone," Clayton said gently. "This little one's still fighting." Jackson had turned away slightly, face pinched. "We need to get them out." "How?" Rowan asked. "You saw that trail. We can't carry a full-grown mare and a foal back down." Jackson looked up, jaw set. "We fly them out." Clayton blinked. "You have a chopper?" "My company keeps a survey helicopter on standby in Marfa. I'll make the call." "Will they even approve that?" Emery asked. Jackson's mouth curled into something between guilt and resolve. "They won't, but I'll deal with the fallout later." Clayton looked him in the eye. "You're serious?" "I helped build the mess," Jackson said. "I'm not walking away from it." Back at the cave, Rowan knelt beside the foal. It was a colt, maybe a week old, pure black with a faint silver star on its forehead. His ribs were too prominent, his breath too rapid. "We'll call him Flint," she whispered. "He's got fire under the ash." Clayton agreed, checking the foal's heartbeat. Outside, Ashfire stood sentinel, not pacing, just watching, guarding. By dawn, the helicopter had arrived. Its blades thudded in the morning silence like the approach of something fated. The rescue team, 2 pilots and a field medic, were led by Captain Ren Salazar, a 40-year-old ex-military pilot with a sharp jaw, sun-darkened skin, and eyes like storm clouds. Ren was known for flying into fire zones and out of disaster areas, but even she paused when she saw the scene. "You're trying to load a dying mare and a newborn into my bird?" she asked. "And that?" She pointed to Ashfire. "He's not cargo," Clayton said. "He's the reason we're here." Ren studied them all, then the horse. Ashfire looked back at her, still regal, unafraid. "Fine," she said. "Let's get to work." The operation took the better part of the morning. Ropes were lowered. A sling was constructed. The mare was sedated lightly and strapped in. Flint was secured in a thermal blanket and placed in a padded crate. Ashfire remained untethered, but never left the cave mouth. When the time came, the stallion stepped forward. Ren raised an eyebrow. "He's coming too?" "He'll ride by choice," Clayton said, and he did. Ashfire walked into the open bay like he understood. By noon, they were airborne. 4 humans, 3 horses, and 1 miracle held together by threads of will, mercy, and something deeper. The sun hadn't yet risen over the ridgeline when the mare exhaled her final breath. Inside the temporary medical enclosure, on the edge of the Davis Mountains Wildlife Station, Clayton Ridge stood motionless beside her still body. The old vet didn't say a word. He just removed his gloves, set them aside, and lowered his head. The mare, whom Rowan had quietly named Ember, had fought for longer than any of them had expected. But the poison had gone too deep. Her kidneys had failed overnight, and even the fluids they'd administered could no longer sustain her. Flint, her surviving foal, had been placed in a separate soft padded pen just a few feet away. At only 2 weeks old, he was still wobbly on his legs, with thin black fur and wide, liquid eyes that scanned the enclosure whenever Ember's scent shifted. He let out a single high-pitched mewling sound, then another. Ashfire was the first to respond. The stallion had refused to rest through the night, pacing just outside the enclosure as if he knew the end was near. Now, as the humans stepped aside to give space, Ashfire approached the pen. The foal stilled, then let out the same sound again. Ashfire lowered his massive head and gently pressed his muzzle to the foal's back. From the corner of the tent, Rowan Tate raised her camera and froze, tears blurring the lens. She didn't press the shutter. At 58, Rowan had seen birth and death in equal measure, but nothing had ever moved her like this. Ashfire, this wild creature, a stallion who should have long since disappeared into the wilderness, was now licking the trembling foal with slow, deliberate movements. He nudged the tiny body toward the shallow water dish, then stepped back just enough to allow the foal to approach on his own. "Good God," Emery Blake whispered. "He's parenting." Rowan lowered the camera. And not instinctively. He's teaching. Captain Ren Salazar, who had stayed behind after the helicopter rescue to assist with logistics, stood just inside the doorway, arms folded. A stoic figure, Ren was known for being hard to rattle. Tall and broad-shouldered, her posture was perpetually upright, like a soldier still halfway in uniform, but her voice was soft now. That's not behavior I've seen in stallions before, not in the wild. Emery, usually the most skeptical among them, sat beside the field monitor and reviewed the footage from the past 12 hours. He zoomed in on Ashfire and Flint's interaction, grooming, guiding, guarding. There's no known precedent for this. Male Mustangs don't usually remain after mating. They certainly don't take over full care. Not like this. Rowan gave him a look. You sound like you're trying to convince yourself. Emery sighed and ran a hand through his graying hair. I am. Jackson Coyle arrived mid-morning, dust clinging to his boots and worry lining his otherwise polished face. Since authorizing the helicopter extraction and putting his own position on the line, the man had been under pressure from every direction: board members, shareholders, media inquiries. Yet he looked different now. Not just tired, changed. Ember passed? He asked quietly. Clayton nodded. She held out longer than she should have. Jackson looked at the foal, now curled beside Ashfire's flank. And the colt. Holding steady, Rowan said. Ashfire hasn't left his side since. Something in Jackson's face flickered, something that hadn't been there before. Empathy. He turned to Emery. Can I ask something? Emery looked up. Of course. Do you think this, he gestured toward the scene in the enclosure, is intelligence or just coincidence? Emery didn't respond right away. If you'd asked me a week ago, I'd have said coincidence, that animals act on instinct, period. He turned back to the screen. But that horse brought us to his mate and foal. He let us treat him. He's forming a bond with an orphaned colt not biologically his. So no, I don't think it's coincidence anymore. Jackson nodded slowly. I needed to hear that. The silence that followed was broken only by Flint's tiny hoof shifting against the straw. By that afternoon, Rowan's first footage of Ashfire and Flint had gone live. She uploaded it with a single caption: a stallion in mourning, a foal in need, and something the wild is trying to teach us. The internet responded instantly. Conservation groups shared it, scientists debated it, ordinary people cried in comment sections. And when the footage of Ashfire licking Flint's face went viral, the public backlash against Parker Industries turned into an avalanche. Under mounting pressure, Parker Industries called an emergency press briefing. They announced a full withdrawal from the Alpine exploratory site, a public apology for failing to assess environmental risk, and the creation of a $10 million conservation fund for wild Mustangs and their habitat. The face they chose to represent the new initiative was Jackson Coyle. He didn't argue. That night, as the team gathered around a fire near the temporary paddock, Rowan sat beside Emery, who now kept a small field notebook not just for samples, but for behavioral observations. You're sure you're not still rationalizing all this? she asked. I'm sure I'm rethinking my entire career, Emery muttered. Wren stirred the campfire with a stick. So what happens now? We keep documenting, Clayton said. We give Flint time to grow stronger. Then we'll figure out whether Ashfire and he are better off here, or back out there. I doubt you'll get Ashfire to leave him, Rowan said. The stallion lay beside Flint under a canvas lean-to, one eye half open, his massive body curved protectively around the foal. Jackson poured coffee for the group, hands no longer trembling the way they had when he first arrived. We'll fund whatever's needed, even if it's a permanent sanctuary. Rowan looked at him over the mug. You mean that? I do, Jackson said. Because once you see this, he nodded toward the stallion and the colt. You can't unsee it. You can't pretend the world is simple anymore. No one spoke for a while after that. They just sat by the fire as the mountain wind shifted, carrying with it the scent of pine, the rustle of horses, and the strange comfort of knowing that sometimes the wild still had the power to change not just what we saw, but who we were. The air in Alpine, Texas, carried the scent of juniper and sun-warmed rock as early spring began to soften the mountain's harsh edges. Snow still clung to the shaded ridges, but the wind no longer bit, it merely whispered as if watching, waiting. The gates to the outer boundary of the temporary wildlife compound stood wide open. Beyond them, a trail led into the rolling wild, untouched and free. Ashfire stood just inside the enclosure, his white coat glowing in the morning light, his mane rippling like fire-spun silk. He was healthy now, strong, recovered, every muscle beneath his hide a tribute to survival and resilience. At his side stood Dust, once frail and trembling, now solid-legged and alert. The black colt had grown quickly under Ashfire's constant guidance. His coat had deepened in color, sleek and wind-polished, with a silver blaze still stretching across his brow. He trotted now with confidence, though he still had that boyish bounce, too curious for stealth, too playful for wariness. Clayton Ridge watched from the observation blind, arms folded over the railing. His silver beard had grown fuller these last few weeks, and the creases around his eyes had softened, not from age, but from something else. Peace. He no longer wore his weathered field jacket. Now it was just a flannel shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbow, hands free of tools. He had not spoken much that morning. This was Ashfire's moment, not his. Next to him, Rowan Tate leaned into her camera. But this time, the lens wasn't raised. She simply watched, lips parted slightly. Her auburn braid had been cut shorter recently, a change she hadn't explained. She seemed lighter. Maybe it was Dust. Maybe it was Ashfire. Maybe it was this quiet sense of purpose that had grown between her and Clayton in the months since Ember's death. Neither of them had named it, but it lived in their glances and their silences. Wren Salazar stood near the main paddock gate, boots planted, arms crossed. She'd stayed beyond her contract, unpaid, unasked, just to see this day through. Her calm demeanor never changed, but the way she greeted the horses every morning had shifted. There was reverence in her stillness now, as if she knew she was witnessing something sacred. Emery Blake sat just behind them, flanked by two new assistants, graduate students from Montana State. One was Jessie Harper, a compact woman with sharp eyes and a ponytail that rarely stayed neat, her curiosity barely contained. The other was Tariq Lane, tall and lanky, with a quiet presence and a habit of scribbling notes into the margins of everything. Both had come to study horse behavior. Neither expected to find themselves watching the rewriting of behavioral science unfold in real time. "You're sure we should do this today?" Rowan asked quietly. Clayton nodded. "Dust is weaned. Ashfire is strong. This is the moment." A radio crackled to life on the table beside them. James Parker's voice came through, calm and low. "Drone is in position. No movement yet." James was observing remotely from the new Alpine Wildlife Research Facility, a project he now led full-time as the director of the Parker Conservation Foundation. Gone were the blazers and boardrooms. These days he wore hiking boots and read environmental studies instead of spreadsheets. He still carried a phone in one pocket, but now it buzzed with questions from conservationists, not shareholders. "Open the gate," Clayton said. Wren signaled to the gate crew. With a slow metallic groan, the main corral gate eased wide. Beyond it lay the trail that would carry Ashfire back into the world he came from. Everyone fell silent. Ashfire stepped forward. For a breathless moment, it looked like he would walk through without pause. He reached the gate, lifted his head, and inhaled deeply, nostrils flaring as the wind carried the scent of distant canyons and old paths. Dust watched him, ears perked. Ashfire took one step past the gate. Then he stopped and turned. The stallion looked back, not with hesitation but with decision. He walked slowly back toward the enclosure, past the edge, past the fence, past the waiting silence of his watchers. He returned to Dust. He nuzzled the colt gently, then lowered himself to the ground beside him. The silence broke. Emery stood. He's choosing to stay. Rowan swallowed hard. He's not just a wild horse anymore. He's a father. From the radio, James exhaled. We'll double the land grant perimeter. He won't need fences anymore. He's home. What followed in the weeks after was the birth of something larger than any of them had expected. The Alpine Sanctuary was formally established as the world's first dedicated behavioral research center for wild Mustangs. A hybrid refuge, it allowed Mustangs injured or orphaned by climate shifts, human expansion, or poisoning to find recovery and study. Ashfire became its emblem. Dust, its living promise. Rowan's footage of Ashfire's return to Dust, captured on instinct rather than plan, became the centerpiece of a global campaign. The video was titled The Choice, and it reached millions in days. It wasn't just about horses anymore. It was about what humanity had lost and what we still might save. Scientists who had scoffed at Emery's revised papers now requested interviews. Schools requested tours. Government officials began revising protection regulations, citing Ashfire's story in official minutes. And deep within the sanctuary, Dust continued to grow, learning not just from instinct, but from a father who chose him when the wild still called. Clayton retired from formal fieldwork and took residence in a small stone cottage built near the research station. Rowan moved into the next one. They never discussed it. They simply stayed. Jesse Harper and Tariq Lane published the first of many joint behavioral studies, noting the communication patterns, the social cues, and, most compelling, the emotional feedback observed between Dust and Ashfire. It wasn't proof, they admitted, not by classical standards, but it was undeniable. And on quiet evenings when the wind carried the scent of pine through the sanctuary, Ashfire and Dust could often be seen standing at the crest of the ridge side by side, father and son, stallion and colt, watching the valley below, guardians not just of each other, but of a future shaped by choice, not instinct. Ashfire was just a wild Mustang, born to roam, to fight, to survive. But when given the chance to leave, he chose to stay. He chose love over instinct. He chose responsibility over freedom. And in doing so, he reminded us of something we often forget in our busy lives, that true strength is not about how far we run, but who we choose to stand beside. In a world where it's easy to walk away, Ashfire stayed. And maybe that's what we need more of today. In our families, our friendships, our communities, the courage to choose commitment, the power to protect what matters, the wisdom to know that sometimes the wildest thing you can do is care. If Ashfire's story touched your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who believes in second chances. Leave a comment and let us know what part of his journey stayed with you. And if you want to hear more stories that inspire, heal, and remind us what it means to be human, subscribe to the channel today.